All right, finally we move on to formatting an APA paper. So first off, there are actually two different types of APA paper. These are the student paper and the professional paper. So we're going to be focusing on the student paper since this is used for a class, meaning that you do not need what is referred to as a running head. But you do need to include the additional information such as what course this is written for, who the instructor is, and what the due date is. Otherwise, you can see the similarities between the two. Several lines down from the top is the title, which is in bold, followed by the name of the author, and then the department, followed by the additional information. Moving on to general formatting. So this is probably going to be very familiar to you. It's going to be very similar to what you would have done in other writing styles. It should be double spaced with no extra space between paragraphs. With a tab at the okay, that was weird enough. I'm going to restart at the beginning of this slide. Moving on from the title page, we have general formatting, which is going to be very similar to what you might have experienced in MLA or just even without any particular format. So you want everything to be double spaced with no additional space between paragraphs. Each paragraph should start with a tab. And you need an easy to read font. So this is actually something that's new for the current version of of APA. So it used to require Times New Roman 12. However, generally, since people are a bit more familiar with computers than they were 20 years ago, it generally just should be an easy to read font that's large enough and can display the statistics that you're using. So Calibri 11 is another recommendation that they give. I'd probably recommend Times New Roman 12 if you're not sure which font to use, but it's not a strict requirement. Also, there should be 1-inch margins on all sides, left aligned, so not justified, but left aligned, meaning that the right side should look jagged like it is there. And there should be a page number in the top right of each page. So I actually included in Microsoft Word how you would go about including the page number. Next is headings. So this is something I really like about APA, is the way that it uses headings. So because of the headings, you can almost write the paper as a sort of outline and then go on from there. So rather than just sit here and talk about this, I'm going to actually create a little bit of an example. So of course we start off with what's called a level 1 heading. That's used for the method section, the results, and so forth. So it's centered, bold, just like you see on the screen. Then we do what's called the level 2 headings. So for a method section, these might be participants, materials, and procedure. These are the most common. Often you might have study design as well, although study design and participants is often combined, but it depends on the study, right? So these are the level 2 headings, and now I'm actually going to take it a step further and use level 3 headings. So level 3 headings are still common, not as common as level 1 and level 2 headings, but they're still often used. So I'm going to split the materials section into stimulus and instruments. And to help make this a little more clear, I'll add some text to show how the text fits in with the headings. So under participants, we might say we recruited 99 participants, 40.3% women. Then we have materials split into stimulus and instruments. So under stimulus, I might say participants read one of 4 vignettes about a fictitious target. That's a sort of stimulus that I often use in my research. And then instruments, I'm going to be a little extra here. And again, this is also the way I write my rough drafts. I'm going to go on to a level 4 heading. So level 4 headings are definitely not as common, but they're not rare either. It really just depends on the sort of paper you're writing. But in this case, my instruments, I'm going to say first we had for gender roles. So you see this is indented, bold, ending with a period, and then I go on and just start writing my sentence. Participants completed the BEM sex roles inventory, abbreviated BSRI. Separate that from the citation with a semicolon. Okay, good. And then my second instrument, I will say anxiety. Participants completed an anxiety scale, and so forth. So here we have our level 1 headings, our level 2 headings, level 3, and level 4. Level 5, we then go ahead and would italicize this as well, and at that point you're getting to pretty rare levels. The last thing I'm going to show here is I'm going to set this up for APA style. So we remove the extra space after each paragraph, and then we double space it. So these are really short paragraphs, so you don't really see the difference. But if these were actually full paragraphs, that would have made a difference. And then I will insert my page number. So insert page number here, top of page, top right, and there we go. That's an APA student paper. Outline of a method section, and then I would fill this in with proper sentences and paragraphs. All right, now let's move back to the slides. And we look at tables. So tables are an important tool of APA style. It's often used in presenting the results. It can be used as long as there's enough information for 2 columns and 2 rows, and that it's easier to present as a table than as a sentence. So we're not going to be super strict about the formatting of tables. Usually for an undergraduate class, that's kind of an extra. But there are some parts that are important. So what are the important parts? Well, as I mentioned, the 2 columns and 2 rows also must be labeled and titled. So with the label where it says Table 1, that's important so that you know where it fits in the text, what paragraph it relates to. And also the title where it says Means and Standard Deviations. That tells you what sort of data you're looking at, what it is that you're reading. Then I have a very common table for figuration. It's by no means the only one. There's about a dozen in the APA manual. But here I've got 2 different trials, and then the means and standard deviations of 4 different variables. And then a note explaining what an asterisk means. Figures are another one. I don't have a separate slide for them because it gets complicated with formatting them. But they similarly need to be labeled and titled. And the last bit of formatting information we have to discuss is the references. So I've got 3 different examples of references here. So first you can see they all start off with the name of the author or authors. And we follow that up with the date. And here's where you start to see a difference. So the 2 academic sources we have, well, maybe that's going a bit too far. We have a journal article, a book chapter that's probably actually more of a popular book, so I shouldn't refer to it as an academic source. But we have a journal article, a book chapter, and a web page. So the web page uses the full date. If it were a newspaper article, a blog, or a magazine, it would also use the full date. Where are my captions? Where did my captions go? Okay, not sure where I lost the captions there. Okay, if it were a journal, anyway, so we have just the year for our academic source and for our book chapter, but for a web page, also for a blog or a newspaper or a magazine, we have the full date. Then we move on to the next piece of information. So this is the title of the actual source itself. So here we have a journal article in sentence case, noticing that the word white is only in quotation marks because it appears that way within the title. We have a book chapter, again in sentence case, and then we have a web page. This is in sentence case, but it is italicized. So that is only for web pages. For whatever reason, it's different from other sources. Next, we have what's sometimes referred to as a container. So this is the larger source that the smaller source is kept within. So for the journal article, of course, that is the journal, which is in title case. For the book chapter, we have the information about the book, so the editors, the book title in sentence case. Both of these are italicized. And then for the web page, we have the larger website that the page is part of. And this is not italicized for whatever reason. So that's just how they handle web pages. Finally, we have extra information. So this is the harder part to remember. So here you have the volume number, issue number, page number for the journal article, followed by the digital object identifier, which is a standardized URL for journal entries to make your references page look nice and standardized. For the book, we have the publisher, and for the web page, we have the URL. So that is all the information for the references. But of course, this would be a little ridiculous to expect you to memorize. So I'm going to show you a source that I often recommend and that I use myself when I'm not physically holding my APA manual. So I'm going to look up the Purdue OWL, or Online Writing Lab. So we can see here, I'm going to click APA Formatting and Style. And here you can see a whole bunch of different types of citations. There's multiple pages on in-text citations, multiple pages on the reference list. And if I were to ask you to memorize this, I would expect you to say, no, this is a little ridiculous. There's a bit too much information here. But it's really useful when writing your own references. So for example, if I click on books, there's multiple types. There's edited books, books with authors, without authors, translations. What would be most commonly used is a chapter in a book. So you can see that here. What's going to be most useful for you in this class is articles and periodicals, specifically academic journals. So an article in a print journal is here, or an electronic journal is what you would most likely be using. Most likely you will not be physically picking up a copy of a journal from a library. You'll be using something like this electronic journal. There's a few different options from there, but most of your citations are going to look like this. Feel free to explore the OWL as you need to from time to time. And that is the end of our module.